What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Going the Distance podcast presented by ImmaculateSports.com. Twitter's at ImacSports.
Is also at Max Sports.
TikTok, YouTube, Immaculate Sports. It's episode 225, and we have another really awesome episode because it's a great week of sports. We got tonight is the first night of the second round for the college football playoff. My Boise State Broncos are playing. That's going to be exciting to see all those games. We have absolute chaos in the NFL, playoff seeds moving around, draft seeding moving around. We got a mock draft we'll talk about a little bit, and lots of moves in the MLB too. So plenty to talk about today.
Yeah, happy New Year's Eve to everybody out there listening, or happy New Year's depending on when you're listening, of course. But it's good to see that the College Football Playoff Committee worked their schedule around our schedule this time rather than the other way around. We get a game on Tuesday night, which is why we're doing the episode a little bit early. And then we also get 3 games tomorrow, Wednesday, to start off the new year on the right notes. And a substitute for Thursday Night Football because we don't get any of that this week. But definitely NFL, college, and then a bit of MLB towards the end of the episode as well, too. I guess I'll get it started with our openers. And my opener, it's nothing crazy, but it's something cool to see. And it's Aiden O'Connell really starting to come into his own during his second season as the Raiders, I guess, part-time quarterback. Obviously wasn't the starter in week 1. Didn't really get a full legitimate start, I believe, until really the Chiefs game on Black Friday, because that was his first legitimate game back from his broken hand that he suffered against the Rams in late October. And since then, he's only thrown 1 pick in 4 games. He's 2-2 in those games. Maybe the touchdown numbers aren't anything crazy, only 4 touchdowns in 4 games, but I've been really impressed with what he's done in the past few games, especially getting the ball to Brock Bowers, getting the ball to Jacoby Myers, just being able to have a quarterback that gets the ball into your playmakers' hands is a nice thing to have when these past 2 years, whether it's been Garoppolo, Ritter, Gardner Minshew, just haven't been able to do that. So I hope Aiden O'Connell isn't our starter long term, but what he's done in the past few weeks definitely is an encouraging sign of maybe a good potential backup for the Raiders for years to come.
Yeah, most of the college football playoff games were not as competitive as we would have liked this week because of the crazy home field advantage in college football. But there were some pretty epic other notable bowl games this week due to more and more top players not skipping out of the game. How about that Pop-Tart Bowl? Miami getting Cam Ward and Damian Martinez for a good portion of that game and still losing to the underdog Cyclones 42-41. Or Navy beating Oklahoma 21-20. It definitely made up for the playoff game. So far, definitely hoping for some better ones this week, today and tomorrow. We'll get into that soon.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. We'll jump into our defensive player, and rookie of the week as we do as always. Starting off with player of the week, Skyler, who'd you choose here?
I got Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. What a ridiculous amount of pressure in their faces this week. Those two hooked up 11 times for 131 and 3 touchdowns in the overtime win against the Broncos. They keep the playoff hopes alive. Burrow had over 400, no interceptions, just fantastic. Doesn't matter if Jamar Chase doesn't have the best game. Dropped a touchdown, made up for it in the end, but it was really the T. Higgins game for those guys.
I went with Joe Burrow as well, too. 412, 3 TDs on 39 completions and 49 attempts. I like how you mentioned T. Higgins as well, too. Shout out to Paul. He's a big T. Higgins guy. He was in his fantasy championship this past week, and he kept on saying, dude, what if T has this 40-point legacy game the whole week, and T. Higgins ends with 40.8 points for him, so it worked out pretty well there. He won his league, which is good to see. But Joe Burrow, man, how good has he been over the last 6 weeks of the season, or the entire season? Let's be real. It's just his defense hasn't been that good. If they had even the Ravens defense or something like that, I think Joe Burrow would definitely be the MVP of the league, or at least in more conversation in it than he is right now. But being as that they still have a chance in this, it's pretty ridiculous to see what he's doing right now. What about the other side of the ball, defensive player of the week?
A lot of great choices for this one. I counted over 20 different players with a forced fumble, but I'm going to go with one of the heroes from last night's game, Kirby Joseph. two big interceptions against San Francisco. One was a great play, one was right to him. Either way, he was exactly where they needed him to be.
Yeah, well, with CJ, two picks, and one of them being a touchdown that he returned. A lot of defensive backs had good weeks. I like Kirby Joseph as well, too. Probably some bigger interceptions, I would say. But CJ did get that one back into the end zone, so I'm giving him the Defensive Player of the Week. Chauncey Gardner Johnson Jr. Yeah, always a weird name to say. But on to Rookie of the Week, and man, was there some rookie performances this past week.
Yeah, Malik Neighbors was pretty incredible, but I'm going to have to go with Jaden Daniels once again because, let's be honest, quarterbacks are graded on a curve, and Jaden Daniels looked pretty great on Sunday night to clinch that playoff spot for Washington. In overtime, he was responsible for every single yard they got to beat Michael Penix and the Falcons.
Yeah, I'm going to give my flowers to Malik Neighbors on this one. He had a ridiculous day, best game of his career so far as an NFL player, 7 for 171 and 2 touchdowns. And the improbable, but somehow we should have known it was going to happen with the Colts collapse against the Giants. They put up 45 points on them. Drew Lock, probably a valid honorable mention for Player of the Week as well, too. He had a ridiculous game. But Malik Neighbors, there's your Rookie of the Week. Moving on to our top 15 power rankings that we've done bi-weekly the entirety of the season. This is the last regular season rankings we'll have. Maybe we'll do a playoff one down the line or whatever, but that's to be determined. And I guess I'll start it off with the same way that we always do. Are there any teams outside the top 15 that did not make your list that you want to talk about or did make your list last time and are not at this time?
Yeah, Houston and Seattle are both going to drop out for me. I just don't trust Houston right now. They're playing terrible football. The offense is clearly still in shock after losing their two of their three biggest receivers. We'll say Nico Collins is back now. That's not all three of them, but obviously taking a big hit to the offense. And Seattle, they're mathematically eliminated now, so I went elsewhere with their pick.
Yeah. I kept the same 15 teams. I think this is the first time all year that I've done that. So, yeah, I guess we'll move right into number 15.
All right, we'll start it off with the Atlanta Falcons, 8-8. They've been unranked for most of the season, but there's a couple of better records out there. Their division's still open. I'm giving the Falcons the last spot for that reason. I thought Michael Penix looked really good on Sunday Night Football. They've clearly kept that entire playbook open despite bringing in the rookie quarterback late. And once he starts hitting on those deep balls, he's going to put up some massive numbers. But they're still alive. They get the spot.
Yeah, for the number 15 spot, I do have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here, moving down 2 spots from their last ranking, sitting at 9-7 and now control their own destiny again in the South. Winners of 5 of the last 6, but the loss that they had just a week ago, 26-24 loss on Sunday Night Football in Dallas was kind of like a shocker for me. I did not expect them to lose that game. They do bounce back really well against the Panthers, won 48-14. But the turnovers and stuff are why they're not higher on this list. They don't really have the defense that can really make up for those turnovers as well from Baker Mayfield this year. I know he's kind of adopted that gunslinger mentality, and it's, you're going to win with him, but you're also going to lose with him. And against some of the defenses that they're going to play in the playoffs, it might be tough. So I have Tampa Bay at 15, moving down 2 spots on to number 14.
At 14, I got the Denver Broncos at 9-7, but the 2 losses in a row drops them down 5 spots. Bo Nix has been great, but my problem with them is they haven't won a meaningful game all season. How can I trust a team whose biggest win was in week 3 against Tampa?
My number 14 spot is a team moving down 8 spots, the biggest drop of anybody on this list, or drop or riser. I don't think I had any integer that big, but I have the Texans here at 14. They have played some pretty bad football over the last 5 weeks, going back to that Titans loss. Since then, they beat the Jags by 3 points, the Dolphins, who don't look that good, by 8 points, and then lost to the Chiefs, and then had that miserable loss to the Ravens on Christmas. They battled injury, but right now C.J. Stroud just does not look to be there. Regardless of who's at receiver, I think especially on that Christmas game, the first half especially, he just looked so off on hitting guys that were wide open. He just overthrew them, underthrew them, threw to the left, threw it to the right, whatever it was. It wasn't working for him. And for a young quarterback, I have a lot of faith in him, but man, right now it's tough to say that they're going to do much in the playoffs, especially being the 4 seed and having to play whoever's the top wild card spot in the AFC this next week. Number 13.
At 13, I got the Tampa Bay Bucks, 9-7, down a couple spots from last time. I don't love that they lost in Dallas and started off so slow. Like you mentioned, it's kind of all up to Baker Mayfield right now, who has been playing his ass off. Over 4,000 yards, 39 touchdowns this season. But hey, all they need to do is beat Spencer Rattler to go back to the playoffs. That's not too difficult.
And number 13 for me, moving down 2 spots, losers of 2 in a row, is going to be where I slot the Denver Broncos. A couple of games against the Chargers and Bengals that were tough, but you kind of expected them to at least get one of them in there. They did not. 2 close losses. Now they go against the Chiefs. Luckily for them, the Chiefs are going to be playing Carson Wentz at quarterback most likely instead of Mahomes, and probably won't see Kelsey or Chris Jones or a lot of the big-time players on their team. So looks like they'll find their way into the playoffs, but I'm not too confident in their team right now, especially with an absolute nothing in the run game, which is just shocking that you can be a playoff team and just have no run game at all in
Give
the
the
NFL.
ball to Audric as the man.
Yeah, for real, that's what I've been wanting really bad. But moving on to number 12.
At 12, maybe a shocker, but I haven't heard them from you yet either. So Cincinnati Bengals, 8-8. They were unranked basically the entire season. I have no idea how they're still alive here in Week 18. They still need some help here, but Joe Burrow's been pretty unstoppable in the second half of the season.
Yeah. Number 12 for me, moving down 5 spots, is going to be where I slot the Pittsburgh Steelers. Losers of 3 in a row, albeit against tough teams in the Eagles, Ravens, and Chiefs. But then again, they didn't really make any of those a game. They play the Bengals this upcoming week, which I'm really looking forward to on Saturday night. It should be a fun one, but with how the Steelers team is right now, I just don't have a ton of confidence in them. Moving on to number 11.
At 11, I got the Chargers, 10-6. They're moving up from 15. Yes, they got killed by Tampa Bay a couple weeks ago, but they're one of these only wild card teams in the AFC playing playoff caliber football outside of Cincinnati. They had that must-win comeback win over Denver and beat down the Patriots to clinch a playoff spot. So I don't think they're going to be resting anyone against the Raiders. That's good for you guys because based on what we heard from Harbaugh, they're going to try to get the best seed they possibly can. They're playing good football.
Number 11 for me, moving up 4 spots. Here's the team that you were looking for. It's the Cincinnati Bengals here. I had them at number 15 last time we did their rankings because my whole argument was that you didn't want to go against them regardless of what the record was. And that's what we're seeing right now. Winners of 4 in a row, Cowboys, Titans, Browns, and Broncos. Going into Pittsburgh on Saturday night, like I just mentioned on the other side of that, will be a fun one because they did lose a 44-38 battle against them last time. I don't expect it to be maybe that extremely high scoring this time around because the defense has looked somewhat better. But Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, whoever it is that's getting the ball, Khalil Herbert now maybe with Chase Brown getting injured, I trust him, especially if it's a 5-point game and 2 minutes left and Joe Burrow's got the ball at their own 25, 2 timeouts. I expect Joe Burrow to go down there and get a game-winning touchdown drive at this point, regardless of who's playing defense. So I got a lot of confidence in the Bengals. And despite their 8-8 record, they're at number 11 for me. Number 10.
At 10, I do have the Pittsburgh Steelers. At 10-6, I'm only going to drop them 4 spots from number 6. I still think they're a top 10 team. It was just a really bad stretch. You know, those games against Baltimore, Kansas City, it's a big litmus test for me that these guys are not ready to go compete for a Super Bowl. So I'm going to drop them below the NFC wildcard teams that we're going to get into here pretty soon. But I still think they're in this upper tier of AFC teams. And we're going to find out this week for sure if they can score that many points against Baltimore again. Cincinnati. Same division.
Yeah. Number 10 for me is going to be where I slot the Washington Commanders. Winners of 4 in a row and 3 straight gutty victories. The game against the Saints that they had where they won on the 2-point conversion or lack of 2-point conversion from the Saints. The comeback against the Eagles even without Jalen Hurts. And then that crazy overtime game against the Falcons on Sunday night to sure up a playoff spot for them. Jaden Daniels is playing like a rookie of the year right now. And I think they're finally starting to find some other options in their offense rather than just giving the ball to Terry McLaurin. We saw him have a bad game, or whether it's his doing or somebody else's doing. Only one catch for 5 yards for Terry McLaurin on Sunday night, and they still found a way to win that one. I think if you were to tell me that Terry would have that stat line in that game, that they would lose that game by probably 20 points. So good on Jaden Daniels for finding some of the other guys, especially Zach Ertz and the big second half of the season that he's had. So Washington is top 10 with 10 wins, or 11 wins.
11.
Yeah. On to number 9.
At number 9, I'm going to have the LA Rams, 10-6. They're up 3 spots from last time. A really big what if this season if they were able to stay healthy, because a lot of those young guys on defense have made it a really complete team. Obviously, they have an expiration date at some point. It's a pretty old team compared to the rest of the league, but as of right now, they've been cooking. Just keep Matt Stafford upright, and hopefully they can figure out that passing attack. Cooper Kupp hasn't done much, but it's still a top 10 team all around.
Number 9 for me is going to be where I slot the Los Angeles Chargers, winners of 2 in a row after dropping 2 in a row against the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. Before that, with J.K. Dobbins back, this team is really at about as full strength as they can be at this point. Herbert looks good. Ladd McConkey looks better than what we expected. And Quentin Johnson, despite the drop problem, is still a pretty good red zone target. I like what they're doing right now. Maybe the offense isn't the best in the league, but their defense is definitely coming along on that side of the ball. So I like what they're doing going into the playoffs. Not going to be a division winner, of course, but maybe could be playing a Texas team that is pretty banged up, as we know. On to number 8.
At number 8, I got Washington at 11-5. That's a +5 from last week. We know better than most fans of the NFL that anybody can almost beat a really good team, but Washington's been able to close out most of these games this year with a rookie quarterback. That's incredible. Again, who knows if this is going to translate once we get to January, but we're getting pretty close, and they still haven't fallen off or slowed down at all.
Yeah. Number 8 for me is going to be where I slot the Green Bay Packers. They're a very interesting team this year. I saw them being compared to that Miami Dolphins team that we saw last year or a couple years ago, where they just could not beat the really good teams. And albeit they've played some really, really tough teams, their 5 losses are 2 to the Lions, 2 to the Vikings, and 1 to the Eagles in week 1 in Brazil. So tough draw there, but it definitely seems at this point that we know what the Packers are, and in my mind, they are not a Super Bowl contender. But still a good team at number 8. On to number 7.
Yeah, at number 7 is where I have the Packers. I have them +1, but at the end of the day, we know who they are, and I like that you said what you did. I think they're going to be able to compete with anyone from the NFC, but it would be nice to see them win one of these close games for once so we can actually trust them. So, no, they're not going in the top 5.
Yeah, I think that's interesting about the Packers too. I think even at this point in the season, we can very much just not know what these teams are. But I think with the Packers, we know exactly what they are at this point in the season. You don't really get that too much. But number 7 for me is going to be where I slot the Los Angeles Rams, and this is exactly one of those teams that we kind of don't know exactly who they are. Are they a defensive team that's going to win late, or are they an offensive team that can put up 40 points per game? These past 3 games for them have all been gutted out victories where they've allowed less than 10 points. And the games before that, they scored 40 points against the Buffalo Bills and allowed 40 points. So what exactly is this team? I don't know. But when they have Puka Nacua, they are a lot better than what they are without him. And they're fully healthy on offense right now. And the Kyron Cup Puka trio with Stafford at QB is really good, and they won the division, so they'll be playing at home once we get to this upcoming week past week 18. Up 3 spots in my rankings. I don't know if I said that. Number 6.
At number 6, I got the 11-5 Baltimore Ravens. They're up 1 spot. I dropped them down a bunch 2 weeks ago, but they've been able to get the job done. 2-0 since then against Houston and Pittsburgh. Lamar Jackson has been doing crazy things each week, and it feels like maybe they have some more momentum than usual going into the playoffs this year.
Number six for me is also going to be where I saw it, the Baltimore Ravens. They move up 2 spots in my rankings. These past 2 weeks for their defense has really been kind of eye opening and saying that, okay, this Baltimore defense isn't, the ran through team that we saw in the first 10 to 15 weeks of the season. Good victory over the Steelers, and then that blowout win against the Texans where they only allowed 2 points, and that was not due because of their defense, of course. Uh, I like what they're doing right now. Probably going to get another victory against the Browns, or their first victory against the Browns this year in Week 18, being as that was an upset in the earlier part of the year. But this team seems to be playing their best football of the season right now, and what a time for it. On number five.
At number five, I got the Philadelphia Eagles dropping all the way out from the number one spot. I was incredibly impressed with their win over Baltimore. So maybe an overreaction to give them the number one spot, but this massive drop is more so about their quarterback, Jalen Hurts. He's still in concussion protocol. They've already locked up the division, so that's another week removed from playing with the starting offense. It's just always hard to tell if momentum's going to carry over. They don't have any right now, so I don't know how I feel about them now.
I'll go number five for me is going to be where I don't move a team. It's been the best team in football over the last 9 weeks, winners of 9 in a row. The Minnesota Vikings sitting at 14-2. We'll talk offseason when we get to the offseason with the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold and their whole situation there. But as of right now, I mean, how can you not say that this team is one of the best teams in football? And they just find a way to get it done, whether it's a one-score victory or, 3-score victory that they had against the Falcons and Bears in the earliest season. But Sam Darnold's been great. Their defense has been so opportune at getting turnovers. They got a chance to go 15-2 and get the 1 seed in the NFC. And I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card going into the season,
No.
Which is pretty ridiculous to say. Kevin O'Connell, coach of the year. Number four.
At four is where I got Minnesota. I ended up moving them over Philadelphia because, damn, these guys are on fire. That's 9 in a row. Sam Darnold slinging it with confidence like he did in his rookie year, but this time around he's able to make these plays without turning the ball over like crazy. And with the help of a filthy defense and defensive coordinator, everything's clicking right now for Minnesota.
Number four for me is going to be where I slot the Detroit Lions. I guess you could kind of mesh the 4 and 5 because they're kind of at the same point right now, going into that Sunday Night Football game that will tell us everything. But this Lions team is just so hurt and so hanging on. They had the early bye. They've been playing good football for 12 weeks straight ever since that bye. But they're just so injured, and if they lose on Sunday against this Vikings team, I can see it just ending their season pretty much. It'll be a tough game the next week in the playoffs to start, but man, they need this one against the Vikings, and I really don't know for this game right now if I can pick them. So moving on to number three.
At three is where I got Detroit. They're up a spot from last week. 2 more wins since our last ranking, and they've done everything they've been asked of this season. 14-2, despite their entire defense hitting the IR. It's something to watch out for the playoffs, but right now it's all about the biggest game of the year, Sunday Night Football against Minnesota. I'm probably going to pick Detroit at home, but you never know. This has been a very tight division all season long.
Number three for me, not moving either, is going to be where I slot the Buffalo Bills. Probably played their most complete game of the season this past weekend against the Jets. That 40-14 final, but we both know that was really like a 40-0 game in that one. They look good, resting their starters most likely against the Patriots, or I guess playing Allen for a couple of drives or whatever. I don't exactly know what they're going to do there, but they look good, and they look to be probably the Chiefs' biggest hurdle in getting their third straight Super Bowl title. Number two.
Yeah, number two is where I have Buffalo. Struggled a little bit against New England, a little bit of a scare there, but obviously embarrassed the Jets on Sunday, so I'm not worried about that anymore. The reason why I bumped them up all the way to 2 is because they're the only legitimate shot of knocking down Kansas City, and it probably won't happen on the road, unfortunately, but we can always hope. that Josh Allen has another crazy day with maybe a receiving touchdown, and they pull out all the tricks for that one. But we're not there yet. But I still have them at 2.
Number 2 for me is going to be where I slot the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, they do not move. I'm not dropping them down for any loss against the Commanders that they had a couple of weeks ago because Hurts got hurt. But since then, they've been just fine. They blew out the Cowboys even with Kenny Pickett and him getting hurt and going to Tanner McKee. This game against the Giants won't matter. I expect Hurts will be back the week after that. And even if he isn't, I don't think their season's over just because they have Kenny Pickett in there or Tanner McKee. Saquon's been so good. Their defense has been so good. That game against the Commanders, if Smitty doesn't drop that pass that's wide open, they win that game. So I got loads of confidence in this team, regardless of who's playing quarterback. To win the Super Bowl, you're going to need Hurts. But to win a game and go 14-3 or whatever it is to get into the playoffs and be the 2 seed, I like their odds with Kenny Pickett, Tanner McKee, or even Saquon Barkley at quarterback if they wanted to do that. Number 1.
Kansas City Chiefs. Had them at 2 last week. Predicted a Pittsburgh upset. That was a mistake. This is clearly the best team in football still. They beat the crap out of Pittsburgh, man. Even though it was a pretty low-scoring game, they don't score 30 points this year for whatever reason. But I would not want to play Kansas City, that's for sure. There's been a lot of talk about which wild card team. I don't care at this point.
Number 1's Kansas City for me as well, too. They don't move. Played their probably best game of the year against the Steelers and playing their best football in general of the season these past few weeks. This is exactly what we expected. And I think you can, I guess, hinge it on the Raiders and the Chargers victories that they had earlier in the season where it was close. A lot of games were close earlier in the season, but those 2 victories kind of felt like real chances where they could have lost and still found a way to win. Could very easily be 13-3 or even, like 11-5 or something right now, but they're not. They're 15-1. They're going to be rolling in that 1 seed. Mahomes will be fully healthy, I'd imagine, by that January 17th weekend or whatever when they're playing again. And, how can you not pick this team to win the Super Bowl again? Their defense is really good. Their offense, albeit not maybe as explosive as before, they're consistent and playing their best ball of the season right now. So Kansas City stays at number 1.
Yeah.
Moving on to college football, probably the most entertaining segment of our episode here today. We've got a game today, Tuesday Night Football, starting off with Penn State versus Boise State. This is a big one to you. How do you think this game goes and who are you picking to win?
I know this team very well, so this is going to be my longest preview by far. So I'm sorry if you forget what you're saying if I go overboard here, but I'll start this off by saying this is not an unfamiliar environment for Boise State. So if you were planning on spending any money on bets tonight, I think 11.5 is pretty aggressive for Boise State, even if they do lose this game. And Genty touchdown, come on. And I'm going to tell you why I think Boise is actually going to win the game too. The most important matchup of this game is going to be Boise's offense against Penn State's defense. Ashton Genty off of 4 weeks rest could be a special sight on his own. But the X factor is going to be Maddox Madsen at quarterback. He's gotten a lot of disrespect this season because he's just a game manager. He's a smaller guy, but he's also a dog. They call him the Mad Dog, just like Greg Maddox. And of course, OC Dirk Cutter. He's a former NFL play caller, a good reputation. It kind of feels like he's been holding back about 60% of the playbook. So you should expect him to find very creative ways to get Genty the ball, not running middle like we've seen before. Keep the ball away from Abdul Carter, very dominant edge rusher for Penn State. We also need to talk about Penn State, of course. Obviously, they played a much tougher schedule. It's very clear to me. I understand Ohio State is better than UNLV. They're going to have that size advantage on paper, but we're not talking about liberty here, all right? These guys beat ranked teams every season. Boise State has had the reputation of a giant slayer, while Penn State tends to come out flat early in these games. At the end of the day, I think they're going to outcoach Penn State. I think Spencer Danielson, with his crazy blitzes, is going to freak out Drew Aller. I think Dirk Cutter is going to coach circles around the James Franklin defense. They're going to run crazy trick plays, and it's going to be a grinded-out game. Boise State wins 26-23. Even if they keep it within 11, I'm going to be happy. It was an awesome season, but I got to go with my guys. We made it so far once again.
I'll say this about Penn State. I was not impressed with their offense against SMU. It felt like they knew that Kevin Jennings was going to explode multiple times, and they just evolved their offense around that, and their defense putting up points for them and getting good field position. And so I don't know if exactly what we saw of Penn State on that game against SMU is what we're going to see tonight from their offense. But I think the biggest question is, can Maddox Madsen not turn over the ball at the rate Kevin Jennings did? And I think there's probably a pretty good chance that he won't, turn over the ball 3 times in the first half and be in a bad side there. But on the other side of this Penn State defense is the best defense that not this Oregon team, because they're not playing Oregon. This Boise State team has played this entire season, especially on the defensive line and the linebackers. And that's going to pose probably a tougher matchup for Genty. But it all hinges on Maddox, man. Can he have a big play early to somebody else to keep the Penn State defense honest? And I honestly give him a good chance to. On the other side of it, it's definitely probably the best offense that they've played since that Oregon game. But I think it's a close comparison to that Oregon team, especially because of what we saw in the Big Ten championship game between Oregon and Penn State. When Oregon played Boise, Jordan James had 17 for 102. But something that stuck out for me is that his longest run of those 17 carries was a 12-yard gain. So he didn't pop one for 50 or anything like that. And I think when that happens, that kind of favors Boise's aspect of the game where they want to play downhill on their offensive side as well too. So I'd expect big games from both these offenses, honestly. I think Genty has a big one. I think Tyler Warren can have a big game as well too. Penn State tight end, you know that, but maybe not everybody knows that. But I'm actually with you. I think Boise has a good chance to win this one. I'm picking them to win. If you're taking Penn State 11.5, again, I don't like that either. I picked Boise 11.5 on my side regardless too. So I'll pick the Broncos to win this one. And I don't think that's too super biased. I don't know. It's a tough game, but I definitely don't think it's going to be a blowout.
They have an easier time popping off big plays than Penn State. And I think that's what's going to decide it.
Moving on to our New Year's game, starting off 10 a.m. on the West Coast on New Year's Day, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl between Texas and Arizona State in Atlanta. How does this one play?
I would love to see ASU pull this one off too. Scadaboo's been pretty unstoppable this season, and the Texas offense has been pretty slow under Quinn Ewers' command lately. But it's all about the other side of the ball in this one. You can ignore Quinn Ewers because he's going to be fine. He doesn't have to do much. Texas has shut down everybody except for Georgia, especially their lockdown secondary. And ASU being without their number one receiver for the rest of the year with 1,000 yards, Jordan Tyson. Give me Texas by 10, 38-28. Maybe Texas can get up there in the score, and that would make it look like a blowout. But I think at the end of the day, you're looking at a very pro-style approach from ASU, and it might not be enough. They may run out of time if they keep trying to run the ball.
Arizona State did not play a team comparable to Texas this entire season. The best defense that Arizona State will play by far, and also the best offense that they'll play by far. No Tyson for Arizona State is only going to make it more difficult for them. I don't expect Texas's offense to struggle against Arizona State. And I don't like saying this because I'm usually on the side of the underdog, but I expect Texas to blow out this Arizona State team. I think Clemson's better than Arizona State. And, I mean, they just don't have the guys to compete with Texas, especially when you're hurt like that. So I think Texas covers. I think Texas has a chance to win by 20 or 30 in this one.
Hey, I'm glad we're not playing Texas. That's for sure.
Yeah. Moving on to the next game. We don't have Thursday night football, but this is probably the closest to a pro football game that we'll get in the college world. It's the Rose Bowl, Ohio State versus Oregon, two very pro-style offenses and two defenses that's got some dogs as well too. So how do you think this one plays out? Perhaps, or not perhaps, most definitely going to be the most watched game this upcoming 2 day stretch.
Yeah, this should be another really good one, considering it's a rematch of one of the games of the year this season. I think Dylan Gabriel against that fantastic Ohio State front is going to be a great matchup, even for an NFL litmus test for you QB needy teams out there. The part I can't get out of my head, though, yeah, I got you. Uh, Ohio State was so unprepared for Michigan, a far superior team when it comes to returning talent. And Oregon getting that first round bye, they've been able to prepare for this familiar opponent for 4 weeks now. I got number one getting the job done. It's going to be a close one again. I got Oregon 34-30.
Yeah, this is a treat of a ball game. I'm looking forward to this. Definitely happy that I'll be able to watch this most likely. Oregon's offense has been the smoothest machine in college football this year and has that track record against Ohio State where it's not just watching film, but you have actual reps against these guys. It's something that you don't get too often in the college football playoff from a matchup that season. And with this expanded playoff, luckily we do get to see it. Or Oregon's lucky that they do get to see that. And same with Ohio State actually as well too. I'd expect a high-scoring game with it coming down to whatever QB makes the most mistakes. And if I were to bet on the QB to make the least mistakes, I'm probably going to bet on Dylan Gabriel because he's made the fewest mistakes out of pretty much any college football quarterback this year. That's just a style play that he like manifests, and that's the style of play that Dan Lanning is going to have him run. He's not going to, now all of a sudden take all these shots downfield. They're going to get their playmakers in space. They're going to run, good zone runs with Jordan James, and maybe some read options with Dylan Gabriel as well too. He's been a valid runner in his time, and I just don't think Ohio State's offense, especially at the quarterback position, is up to par with Oregon. On the other side of that, though, they definitely have the better defense than Oregon as well too. Some more NFL talents in there. I don't think it's going to matter though. Regardless, I think both these offenses are going to score. I both think these offenses are going to score a lot of points, and I think Oregon wins by 3 or 4. But my money's on the Ducks to get it done.
Yeah.
Next up, prime time for the All-State Sugar Bowl in Louisiana. It's Notre Dame against Georgia. I guess considered a home game for Georgia too.
Basically going to be a pick 'em for this one, despite Georgia having the coaching advantage and probably defense too. They're forced to go in with the freshman quarterback, Gunnar Stockton, and it's no disrespect to Stockton. It's basically like going into a game with one hand tied behind your back here. At least he got some action in the last game. He just didn't look that good. It wouldn't shock me if Georgia pulled it off again. They've been here before, but I'm going to take the risk here and go with a team that's currently humming on offense. I'm going to say this is a very similar game to the Rose Bowl with a lot more mistakes. Notre Dame wins this one 27-20.
Don't get fooled by the name in this one. This Georgia team is not as good as previous years, especially in terms of NFL talent on both sides of the ball, but mainly on the offense. They don't really have the wide receiver or tight end that really stands out to you as those guys going to be a first-round pick this year or anything like that. And with the quarterback Gunnar Stockton and his kind of unknown track record, obviously because he hasn't played much at the college level, it's going to be tough for me to put any money on them. So I'm going to lean Notre Dame. Obviously, if Georgia gets ahead early and Notre Dame's got to pass, that's when shit starts to turn. But if Notre Dame keeps this a one-score game, I'm confident in their ability to take over the game late with their good defense and their very good run game against a Georgia defense that isn't – I'm not saying it's not anything special, but it's not top of the country Georgia defense that we've been used to in previous Kirby Smart years.
You're going to trust – sorry.
I'll go Notre Dame. That's what I was saying.
You're going to trust, and sorry for cutting you off. I was just adding on there. Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love to break off big runs more than you're going to trust the freshman backfield of Georgia. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So those are our picks for that. Moving on to our MLB free agency grades. We only got 3 this week, but there's some pretty important deals, I would say. Starting off with Teoscar Hernandez going back to the Dodgers for 3 years, $66 million.
I'm going to give the Dodgers an A plus for this one. You may say that's a lot of money for a 30-plus-year-old corner outfielder, but Teoscar Hernandez was a huge part of their success last season. You don't want to force moves based off of emotion like the Yankees were doing. So retaining as much as possible is always going to be valuable when you're talking about a shorter term deal. That's why I have the A plus. Nothing is going to go wrong with this one. The worst case is in a year and a half you realize you can't run anymore and you flip them.
So you can't put him at DH, but
Exactly.
because I got Shohei. But I also give this an A plus. This is less money than I expected to for a 3 year deal. I expected for Teoscar maybe a 5 for 100. But when it goes down to a 3 year deal, I expected probably 25, 27 AAV, and he got way less than that at 22. This is a perfect short term to medium term move for the Dodgers, where they don't have to commit to him for 4 to 5 years or whatever. It's perfect bat for this lineup as well too. He had perhaps his best season, I would say, of his career, because he had some really good years in Toronto, but definitely way better than his Seattle year in 2023. As what he showed in 2024 at the Dodgers. It fits perfectly as well too, where it's not like it just balances this lineup, and they needed it this past year. They're going to need it again this year, and so I love this deal for them. I expect him to follow up exactly what he did this past year for them. So A plus. Next up, smaller deal here. Gleyber Torres, 1 year, $15 million to the Detroit Tigers.
I got a B plus for the Tigers. You got to be happy as a baseball fan, at least a little bit for these guys. It may be a small move on the scale of everything that's happened this offseason, but these guys really haven't gone out and spent money on a bat that is above average like this. And I know it's not saying a lot, but they haven't had a lot to work with. And for this guy, whose main job is to hit the baseball hard at an above average level while playing a tough position, middle infield, it's a big win for a small market team.
Yeah. I like the steal a lot. I give it an A. It felt like this is something this lineup needed, and I think it's a really good price for a guy who has some pretty high upside. Only thing shitty for Detroit here, if Gleyber Torres has a good year, he's gone.
Yeah.
There's no way that you're going to be able to pay him 25 to 30 mil if he has this 850 OPS year or something like that from the second base position. However, this lineup still feels very thin at the bottom half. I think that they still need to do some things, and maybe even add in AJ Hinch, his former third baseman, and Alex Bregman would be a good way to start there. But who knows if they're going to throw the money that Bregman's been wanting. And I think that's probably why Bregman hasn't been signed yet to anywhere, because he's been wanting way more money than what he is actually valued at. But for the money, and for the fit, I really like this for Detroit, so I give it an A. Someone who's been there too in the playoffs as well. I know the Tigers were in the playoffs, so it's not like they don't have any postseason experience. But a vet who's been in the playoffs, 3 to 4 times already in his career definitely helps for a young lineup that was kind of needy on the offensive side of the ball for most of the year. Next up, the biggest signing that we had, Corbin Burnes goes to Arizona. Kind of a late night shocker. That came around when I was laying in bed, whatever night it was, and I was like, whoa, that's not something I expected at all. 6 years, $210 million for the ace.
I'm going to give it an A. The Diamondbacks scored the most runs in baseball last season and still missed the postseason. Here's a guy who is still a legitimate ace, and this was the top issue when battling with the Dodgers. So now hopefully you have a guy maybe can play through his whole 6 year contract. There's a 2 year opt out, but he goes deep into games. He comes for cheaper than Baltimore and Toronto were offering him. And it's not quite Colorado, but it feels like these guys haven't been able to put together a solid rotation since they won the World Series in 2001. So good for them. I'm happy, but I'm not going to give it an A plus because you never know with pitchers coming into that dry air, right?
I like this deal, mainly because it takes away from your competitors, especially the Giants or the Padres or the Dodgers, the teams in your division. So I give it an A minus. I think it's a necessary price to pay for a pitcher of that caliber. Burnes and Gallen immediately become, a top rotation duo in the MLB. The only downside of this is that this makes your rotation extremely expensive due to the contracts that you gave Eduardo Rodriguez and Jordan Montgomery this past year. However, this is also a huge failsafe for them. If Monty or Erod or both of them don't come back to the way that you do, you still have a good rotation with those two guys at the top and Gallen and Burnes. But if Erod and Monty go back to being the way that they are, and you can rely on Fott or Merrill Kelly to be your fifth guy, this rotation can be one of the best in the MLB. Combine that with that offense. I know they don't have Christian Walker anymore, but you add in Josh Naylor. There's no reason that Arizona shouldn't make the playoffs. And man, I just think about this from the Giants' perspective, even though we're not Giants fans. Like,
Yeah.
man, you fucking failed here. Like, Corbin Burnes is from the Bay Area. He went to St. Mary's. Like, this is your opportunity to strike. And now you're sitting behind the eight ball again because you're not better than the Dodgers. You're
Now
not
they're
better than
shopping
the
the
Padres.
bargain bin again.
Yeah, and you're definitely probably not better than the Diamondbacks either. And when you're the fourth best team in your division, good luck in getting the 87 wins or 89 wins, whatever it is, to get in the playoffs at a wild card team. So I don't know why I'm talking about the Giants here because it doesn't really matter to me, but it feels like another lost offseason for the Giants, but a good job from the Diamondbacks, so they get an A-. Moving on from where's your head at, we're going to the second half, and Skyler's got a mock draft.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential conversation for other things here. The transfer portal's been heating up. Obviously, there's different prospects we can talk about, but we got a lot of time for that. We're about 4 months out of the draft, so I figure we'll save that for a day when there's not a lot to talk about. However, we did have a major switch up with the draft order, and I changed things up here. So I kind of want to get your reaction. I went outside of the norm, and I tried to go with, all right, GMs don't want to get fired. What happens if they take who they think is the right fit, not who we think is the right fit? So let's get right into it. The Patriots are back with the top spot, just like they were a month ago. It's still going to be Travis Hunter. Maybe they trade back in the real draft. I didn't do any trades. I can't imagine that the Raiders would have to give up too much in a weaker quarterback class to move up. Probably less than like that Titans Jared Goff trade. But anyways, Travis Hunter, they can pick and choose whatever they want to do. They're a mess of a team. Try to get that tackle in the second round, maybe. Number two, with the Tennessee Titans, I still think they're going to go veteran quarterback route. So I think the next best player in the draft, in the eyes of the GMs, is going to be Abdul Carter of Penn State. We're going to go early with the defense. We saw a lot of receivers and linemen go last year. I have a lot of defensive players in this first round because there's not a lot of great defense getting played in the league right now. At number three, though, the Browns are going to kick it off with the first quarterback. I feel like Cam Ward is going to have no problem going to Cleveland. Obviously, the money gets a little tricky, but I can't imagine Jameis is back, and I can't imagine that Deshaun Watson is going to be well liked. Is that the nicest way to say it? Well liked for much longer for any team in the league. Maybe a pairing of Cam Ward and Kirk Cousins. We'll see. At number four, the Giants, unfortunately, will take the next quarterback to Shedeur Sanders to the Giants. Seems like a pretty good fit. They've been in conversation. He wore those Giants cleats. And even if Shedeur Sanders is considered the top quarterback, I don't know if the Browns would be comfortable taking him. So we'll see. At number five, Jacksonville, it's another wild card, but I think they're going to go best player available again, too. Will Johnson, corner from Michigan, hasn't played. Really unfortunate, but he already declared for the draft. They told him, hey, you're going to go in the top however many picks, so you should just leave. So that gives me a pretty good indicator he's still going to go early, even though we were a little curious at first where the corners would go. Another guy we won't get into, Benjamin Morrison, because I think he's going back to school. He hasn't played since like week 2. The next pick, though, Carolina Panthers. This one hurts me because I'm going to give them Mason Graham. They've had a really hard time stopping the run, but it seems like another very quick fix to maybe a big problem that they'll try to do so they don't get fired. Number 7 is where we have some fun, though, because I didn't want to do the norm, right? The Jets usually do the complete opposite of the norm, so I gave us Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State. I think if he has another really big game in the playoffs, he's definitely going to be considered a top 10 pick like Brock Bowers was. I'm not saying he's the same athlete, but he does a lot of same stuff. Maybe that would get us to take him, and probably a trade back to like 14 and take him then, but no trades in this draft. So funny to see Tyler Warren up there. That leaves Tet McMillan for the Raiders. I'm sure you're really happy. I know we talked about this earlier, like Tet McMillan falling to 8. What? But hey, got 5 defensive players already taken. So really good odds for you guys. I would say probably a Milrow, maybe not after today, but a Dart or a Gabriel in round 3, and then try to get Arch next year would be probably my best case.
It's a weird spot, I would say, especially if you end up drafting at 8. I think the most realistic thing is they probably try to trade up and go get Cam Ward or Shadur. But if we get Tet, I'm not going to complain unless we take Carson back at like the second round or something like
There's
that.
no
If we
shot.
take, that's what you might think. There's no
No,
shot.
I
But
guess we're talking about the Raiders, yeah.
yeah, if it's Gabriel, if it's Dart, if it's waiting next year for Drew Aller or Arch or whatever, I guess it could be with it because if you're coming into a system as a young quarterback and you have Brock Bowers and Tet McMillan, what's there to complain about? Like you got some good stuff, but I think if you don't take the quarterback this year or you don't get figure out a long term situation with him, then you really start looking at the possibility of Max Crosby wanting to leave. Maybe even some of these other guys around him as well too. Retaining Jacoby Myers might be tough because these guys want a quarterback, that's for sure.
Yeah. Either way, it's a pretty messed up situation. And I will say I was on that let's just wait for Trevor Lawrence boat before, and that didn't work out very well. So there's no answer really, and I'm sorry you're going through it again, and we're probably just a year behind you. So we'll see.
Been there before.
Yeah. The Bears at 9. This is where we start getting into Ashton Genty conversation. I just don't think the Raiders value running back as much with the current regime, just because we've seen the guys that they've rotated this year. They think they can pull it off with 3 minimum guys. But the Bears, I have them taking a tackle. My first tackle in the class will be Ohio State left tackle Josh Simmons. Not very high on the mock drafts. I think when they see him actually out there running compared to some of the other guys, they're going to realize, oh, this is a left tackle now. These other guys are guards. After that, though, a couple defensive players: the Saints, Nick Scourton, edge rusher from A&M; the Niners, James Pierce Jr., edge from Tennessee. You can't do it all with Nick Bosa or all with an old Cam Johnson. Who it's really old defenses over here. The Colts, similar story, right? I have Malachi Starks, safety from Georgia, and finally the Cowboys at 13. We'll take Ashton Genty. I can't see him falling too far. We usually see teams move up for these offensive superstars if they start falling a little bit, but it's really hard to project right now who is going to be. Oh, I'm an Ashton Genty guy. Like just for example, at 20, I have the Broncos taking Isaiah Bond. I don't think he should go in the first round, but Sean Payton's going to fall in love with a guy like that, right? Let's see, what else do we got down here? The Ravens, Jahdae Barron, the nickel corner from Texas. We'll get to see him play against Arizona State. He's been really good at multiple different positions. And we'll close it off with the Chiefs taking Josh Connerly Jr., offensive tackle from Oregon. I have a couple of small school guys on my mind. I'm not ready to throw them in the mock draft just because the most we've watched so far are the playoff teams. They played so many more games. But once we get to the Senior Bowl, like a guy like Tank Dell, a no-name from Western Alabama, like, whoa, this is the best receiver here, jumps up to the second or third round. That kind of stuff will happen. It always does. And that is the mock draft.
Moving on to our Layups Bowl predictions, which did not go well this past week. Well, we went 0 for 4, but it happens. You have good weeks, you have bad weeks. This was a bad week. I had Titans -1 versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville won that game, so obviously that did not happen. Skyler had Carolina +8. If it was +30, it wouldn't have hit. So it was a rough game for Carolina. This week, I have Cincinnati moneyline versus Pittsburgh on Saturday. I believe Cincinnati is a 1.5-point favorite right now, but taking that money line, -145 or whatever it is, isn't a bad bet. I like their odds. Pittsburgh hasn't been playing good. Cincinnati definitely has been playing good, so take them while they're hot.
Yeah, of course, right. I go 14-2 on my NFL picks, and the 2 ones I miss are on the the spreadsheet for the podcast. That's just how it goes sometimes. But I'm going to stick with a pick I already talked about today. That's number 3 Boise State plus 11.5. This is not going to be a shootout. This is going to be a chess match. It's going to be within 12 points. I promise you it's going to be a really good game, even if Penn State does pull away late.
Last week bowl prediction, I had Chicago money line versus Seattle on Thursday Night Football. It was a 3-point game, but man, it was an ugly football game. 6-3. It did not hit. Skyler had Pittsburgh plus 130 versus Kansas City. We'll just move on from that. This week, I have Minnesota money line versus Detroit. Minnesota's got a chance in every single game that they've played, especially in these crazy one-score games. And if you're an underdog as a team that's 14-2, you got a chance to make plus money on them. I think that's something you got to take quite a bit often. I know they're playing Detroit in Detroit, which is a tough matchup. But Minnesota's the more healthy team. They've been playing better football than Detroit over the last 9 weeks. And this is crazy, but I trust Sam Darnold, man. I really do. He's a stud. And I mean, what a time for that 2018 draft class, except for Josh Rosen.
Yeah.
He's selling insurance.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sticking in division with this one, NFC North. I got Chicago money line plus 320 against Green Bay. We've already talked about today, both of us don't really trust Green Bay right now. This is a game they don't really need to win. Maybe we'll see Caleb Williams finally start to take that next step, even if it is too late to compete this season, just to get a good start. We always see crazy stuff last week of the season. This one didn't look too bad to me for plus 300.
That's going to do it, though, for episode 225. And episode 226 will be in 2025, so New Year there.
Yeah.
But until then, we got a lot of good football. We got some very important football games, whether that's the NFL or college. Basketball, I guess, is still going on, but I don't think anybody's watching that right now.
So disappointing.
Unless it's LeBron versus Steph, then you're watching. Yeah. Happy belated birthday, LeBron James. Your 40th was yesterday. So congrats, King, on that one. But yeah, that's gonna do it. You got anything else?
Kyle, I'll see you next year, and let's go Boise State, man. Let's have some great games these next 2 days.
Broncos country.
Let's ride.
Let's ride.